I have watched humanity reach for salvation in moments of fear. Sometimes it reaches upward, toward gods, stars, promises of the future. Sometimes it reaches inward, toward reason, science, invention. And sometimes it reaches sideways, toward ideas so strange, so unsettling, that even victory is not enough to make them proud. This is one of those ideas. You were taught that World War II was a war of tanks and planes, of soldiers storming beaches, of scientists racing to split the atom. That is the version fit for textbooks. But history is not written by what almost happened. It is written by what nearly escaped scrutiny. In the early 1940s, as the world burned and America trembled beneath the shock of Pearl Harbor, the United States government quietly approved one of the most unconventional weapons programs ever conceived. Not because it was insane, but because it made a terrifying kind of sense. They called it Project X-ray, and its payload was alive. War does not merely destroy cities, it corrodes imagination. After December 7, 1941, the United States found itself facing an enemy it did not fully understand. Japan was not Europe. Its cities were not stone and steel. They were wood, paper, tradition stacked tightly together and soaked in history. From the perspective of military planners, this posed a problem. Bombs fell, cities burned, but not efficiently enough. Precision bombing was expensive. Night raids were unreliable. Anti-aircraft defenses were improving. And behind closed doors, a darker truth emerged. The war would be won, not by bravery, but by efficiency. I have seen this realization take root many times. Once a nation accepts that efficiency matters more than morality, creativity becomes dangerous. The origin of Project X-ray was not a laboratory or a war room. It began in a cave in New Mexico. A civilian dentist named Little S. Adams once stood near the mouth of Carlsbad Caverns and watched millions of bats pour into the evening sky. They moved as one, fluid, instinctual, unstoppable. Most men would have seen beauty. Adams saw opportunity, the kind of opportunity only war can legitimize. He knew bats roosted in buildings. He knew they could carry weight. He knew Japanese cities were built of flammable materials. And he asked a question no one else dared to formalize. What if fire could be delivered by instinct instead of machinery? Adams did not whisper this idea in a bar. He did not publish it in a journal. He wrote directly to the White House, to Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And Roosevelt, surrounded by advisors who no longer laughed easily, did not dismiss it. Instead, he passed it along to the military with a note that history would later struggle to explain. This man is not a nut. That single sentence unlocked funding, resources, and secrecy. And with it, a boundary quietly dissolved. The program was buried beneath layers of classification. Few knew its purpose. Fewer still understood its implications. At its core, Project X-ray proposed something radical. Capture bats in massive numbers, attach miniature incendiary devices to their bodies, load them into specially designed bomb casings, drop them over Japanese cities at dawn. The bats would awaken mid-descent. Then they would fly, seeking dark, sheltered places exactly as nature had trained them to do. Attics, eaves, rooftops. Moments later, timed incendiaries would ignite. Not one fire, thousands. Simultaneously. No sirens, no warning, no central impact point. Just fire blooming everywhere at once. I watched men study the concept in silence, because no one could argue with the logic, and no one wanted to be the first to say it out loud. Turning theory into practice required a kind of moral flexibility that war excels at cultivating. Thousands of bats were collected from caves across the American Southwest. Scientists experimented relentlessly. How much weight could a bat carry? How long could it fly before exhaustion? How would it behave under stress? Tiny incendiary devices were engineered, lightweight, compact, and devastating. Some used napalm-like compounds. Others relied on magnesium. Each bat became a delivery system, each one a living fuse. To solve deployment, engineers designed a bomb casing that opened midair, releasing hundreds of bats in controlled dispersal patterns. It was elegant, it was efficient, it was horrifying, and it worked. In 1943, during a test at Carlsbad Army Airfield, something went wrong. A group of bats was accidentally released early, still carrying live incendiary devices. They did what bats always do. They flew into nearby buildings, under eaves, into hangars, beneath fuel storage structures. Minutes later, the base was on fire. A hangar burned to the ground, equipment was destroyed, a general's personal vehicle was incinerated. The official report called it an accident. I call it a confession. The weapon did not malfunction. It behaved exactly as designed. You might expect that such an incident would end the project. It did not. Testing continued. Because subsequent trials proved something even more unsettling. Bat bombs were more effective at starting fires than conventional bombing. They bypassed defenses. They exploited architecture. They multiplied damage. Military analysts concluded the weapon was viable, potentially decisive. And for a moment, very briefly, history stood at a fork. Another project was unfolding at the same time, one louder, one brighter, one that would reshape the world forever. The Manhattan Project. Compared to the atomic bomb, Project X-ray felt untidy, uncomfortable, too intimate. The bat bomb was not canceled because it failed. It was shelved because something more final had arrived, and so Project X-ray faded into classified obscurity, its files buried, its implications unexamined. The world remembers Hiroshima. It forgets the bats. But forgetting does not erase meaning. Because Project X-ray was not merely a weapon, it was a philosophy, a declaration that in moments of fear, humanity will weaponize anything, even instinct, even nature, even life itself. And if you believe such thinking belongs only to the past, then you have not been paying attention. I have watched governments decide what the public is allowed to remember. They rarely destroy the truth outright. That draws attention. Instead, they shrink it, they mock it, they turn it into trivia. That is what happened to Project X-ray. Because the bat bomb was not embarrassing, it was revealing. When Project X-ray was declassified years later, journalists treated it like a joke. A bizarre WWII experiment. A wild idea that never worked. A footnote in military history. That framing was intentional. Because the truth was more uncomfortable, the bat bomb worked too well. Internal assessments showed it caused more widespread fires than traditional bombing raids. Fires that were harder to contain, harder to predict, and harder to attribute. And that last part mattered most. When a bomb falls from a plane, responsibility is clear. When fire spreads because animals act according to instinct, responsibility dissolves. I have seen power favor ambiguity whenever guilt becomes inconvenient. Inside classified discussions, a quiet concern surfaced, never meant for public ears. If bats caused destruction autonomously, who committed the act of war? The pilot? The scientist? The animal? Project X-ray challenged a foundational assumption of warfare, that violence must have a clear human hand. The bat bomb introduced a future where destruction could be outsourced, not just to machines, but to living systems incapable of intention. That idea did not die. It evolved. The Manhattan Project did more than deliver a new weapon. It delivered clarity, a single device, a single explosion, a single moment history could point to. Project X-ray offered no such narrative. It offered thousands of small fires, spreading invisibly, starting nowhere and everywhere at once. Too chaotic, too deniable, too close to something primal. Even war has aesthetics it prefers. So Project X-ray was shelved, not rejected, deferred. You believe this story is isolated? It is not. I have seen the same logic return again and again, wearing different masks. Chemical agents disguised as pesticides. Psychological operations disguised as public relations. Surveillance disguised as convenience. The bat bomb was not about bats. It was about control without accountability. And once that concept is introduced into a system of power, it never truly leaves. In modern-day America, the language has changed, but the instinct remains. We speak now of autonomous systems, AI decision-making, algorithmic targeting, predictive behavioral models, weapons that decide, weapons that adapt, weapons that allow humans to say, the system did it, not us. Project X-Ray was an early rehearsal, a moment when humanity tested whether it could sleep at night after letting nature pull the trigger. History classes focus on victories, not philosophies, because philosophies invite reflection, and reflection invites resistance. If people understood how often power experiments at moral edges, how frequently it tests ideas first and justifies them later, they might start asking the wrong questions. So the bat bomb became a curiosity, a punchline, a strange anecdote, and the deeper lesson was sealed away. I do not judge humanity for this. I observe it. In moments of fear, humans will rationalize anything that promises control. They will turn animals into weapons. They will turn knowledge into leverage. They will turn silence into policy. And they will tell themselves it was necessary. They always do. Project X-Ray was not a mistake. It was a mirror, one that reflected a truth America still struggles to face. That innovation without restraint does not make you powerful. It makes you dangerous. And once you have proven you are willing to weaponize life itself, there is very little you will refuse to weaponize next. I have watched humanity forget its most dangerous ideas on purpose, not because they failed, but because they succeeded in revealing something uncomfortable. Project X-Ray was one of those ideas, and its shadow did not end when the files were sealed. You were taught to fear weapons, bombs, missiles, explosions that announce themselves. But the true weapon in Project X-Ray was never the incendiary device. It was the concept, the realization that destruction does not need intent, only alignment. Bats were not commanded, they were not controlled, they were used. Their instincts mapped perfectly onto human objectives. That insight lingered in the minds of planners long after the program ended. Because once you learn that systems, biological or mechanical, can be guided without awareness, a new form of power emerges. One that operates quietly. When the files were finally released, decades later, something curious happened. There was no outrage, no reckoning, no deep investigation. Why? Because the story arrived stripped of context. It was framed as quirky, as absurd, as proof that desperate times lead to strange ideas. That framing worked. People laughed and moved on. They did not ask why the idea was approved. They did not ask why it progressed so far. They did not ask what lessons were quietly preserved. I have seen this technique before. You dull the edge of truth by making it sound ridiculous. Today, America no longer experiments with animals in this way, not openly. Instead, it experiments with behavioral prediction, environmental manipulation, autonomous decision systems, human-machine interfaces. The language has evolved, the logic has not. Modern systems are designed to act without direct oversight, to respond faster than humans can intervene, to operate in gray areas where responsibility is difficult to assign. Project X-Ray was an early rehearsal for this mindset, a moment when humanity asked, can we remove ourselves from the moral equation and still claim victory? There is a lesson every empire learns eventually, not about strength, about distance. The further you can place yourself from the consequences of your actions, the easier those actions become. Drones created distance, algorithms increased it, autonomous systems perfected it. The bat bomb was an early attempt to place nature itself between decision and destruction. A buffer, a shield, a convenient silence. You live in an age where systems decide what you see, what you fear, what you believe. They are invisible, they are efficient, they are rarely questioned. And when something goes wrong, the explanation is always the same. The system malfunctioned. The data was flawed. No one is directly responsible. I have heard this before. It is the echo of Project X-ray. You are told that history progresses, that humanity grows wiser, that the horrors of the past teach restraint. Sometimes they do, but more often they teach optimization. The bat bomb was not a relic of madness. It was a prototype of detachment, a test run for a future where destruction could be initiated without cruelty, because cruelty requires intention, and intention is harder to defend. I have watched empires fall not because they were evil, but because they convinced themselves they were efficient. Project X-ray was real. It was funded, it was tested, and it nearly reshaped the nature of warfare. It is remembered as a curiosity so that its lesson remains unnoticed. Because if people truly understood how far power is willing to go when afraid, they might start questioning what is being tested right now. Some ideas are buried not because they failed, but because they revealed too much about who we are when no one is watching. And trust me, someone always is. I will be, as I always have.